Hey guys, tonight we're unwrapping something so seasonally strange, so deeply British, and so hilariously questionable that it might make you appreciate every ugly sweater you've ever received. We're plunging headfirst into the world of Victorian Christmas presents, the only time in history when getting an orange was a luxury. Toys were indistinguishable from small weapons, and nothing said festive like a handmade gift that could kill you before Boxing Day. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, and get comfortable. Maybe pull the blanket up so the ghost of a Victorian doll can't crawl onto your feet. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what Victorians thought was a fun Christmas surprise? Why did so many gifts have sharp edges, strange smells, or an existential lesson attached? Did your average 1880s child ever wake up and hope the gift wasn't a taxidermized squirrel or a tiny malfunctioning chemistry set? What's the story behind Christmas cards with dead robins and drunk frogs? And why did every toy seem to require a fire hazard warning? Would you survive a morning in a world where the best-case scenario was a fruit, the worst case was a child's first taxidermy kit, and Santa looked more like a sleep-deprived Dickensian landlord? Congratulations. You've just woken up at 1884. The streets are foggy, the air tastes like coal, and someone's handed you a gift that smells faintly of glue and regret. Good luck. It's Christmas morning. In the Victorian age, the room is freezing. Your nightcap is only slightly less itchy than your blanket, and you're awoken not by cheerful jingles but by the sound of someone coughing up a lung in the street. Time to discover if your stocking contains food, fire, or something you'll need to apologize to later. You blink awake, breath puffing in the cold air. It forms tiny clouds above your lips, which would be whimsical if your face wasn't already numb. The family is stirring all around you. There's no such thing as privacy. Your little brother is snoring with his foot in your face. Your mother is wrapped in 4 shawls, and a sense of quiet resignation. And somewhere in the gloom, a mouse is making highly suspect plans involving the last of the cheese. No one is singing. No one is dashing down a staircase. That's because there are no staircases. There's just one shared, slightly sloped floor that creaks with every hopeful footstep. Outside, a distant church bell clangs, a sound that, in Victorian London, serves as both holiday cheer and a reminder that time, like your toes, waits for no one. You peel yourself from the mattress. It's technically made of straw, but after 2 years of use, it's basically an ecosystem. You wriggle your frozen feet into slippers so thin they have the thermal properties of a wet newspaper. Congratulations. You've made it out of bed without stepping on a pine needle or someone's discarded boot. Stockings hang by the fireplace. A fireplace that hasn't had a proper coal delivery since the summer of '82. The fire is just a faint memory, the kind of comforting glow you see in novels, not in your actual life. Your stocking is not a bright, cheerful red, but more of a once was white, now questionably grey situation. It's stuffed with hope and, if you're lucky, an orange, maybe a walnut, or perhaps, in a fit of festive generosity, a small wooden toy that looks suspiciously like it used to be part of the window frame. You reach inside, heart pounding. Is it food? Is it a puzzle? Is it last year's orange with a new ribbon? The suspense is genuinely thrilling, mostly because you know if it's edible, you'll need to eat it before it's claimed by siblings or the local rat population. The air smells of coal dust, boiled cabbage, and a hint of whatever was spilled on the rug last week and never discussed again. Victorian Christmas magic. It's about managing expectations. Your mother smiles wearily and hands you your big present, a hand-knitted scarf. It's scratchy enough to serve as emergency sandpaper. And it's probably longer than you are tall. But you wrap it around your neck like a badge of honor. You thank her sincerely, not because you're ungrateful, but because in Victorian times, gratitude is a survival instinct. There's always the chance next year's present will be less scarf and more cautionary tale. You look around at your family, all shivering in a collective attempt at holiday spirit. Someone suggests caroling, but everyone wisely ignores this. The closest thing to music is the gentle rattling of window panes as a new draft creeps in. Outside, neighbors crunch through the frost, wrapped in layers, and the faint hope that this year the Christmas goose will stretch far enough for leftovers. You sit with your stocking on your lap, feet pressed against the faintest warmth left in the hearth. Christmas in the Victorian age is not about luxury, it's about survival, tiny joys, and savoring whatever moment of comfort you can wring from a cold, relentless winter. You take a bite of your orange, if you're lucky enough to have one, and it tastes like sunshine, hope, and the smallest miracle. And just as you're starting to feel genuinely festive, someone coughs again, loudly. The doll in the corner seems to blink. You pull your scarf tighter, eye your stocking's mysterious contents, and realize you've survived another Victorian Christmas morning. It's all uphill from here, maybe. You reach into your stocking with anticipation, only to pull out a slightly bruised orange, 3 walnuts, and an object that may or may not be a dental device. Victorian parents believed practical gifts built character. Modern children would call this trauma. The stocking, perhaps more accurately described as Dad's second-best sock, now officially repurposed for holiday disappointment, hangs limply from the mantel, faded and patched, with just enough stretch left to encourage optimism. You peer inside, heart fluttering. This is it, the magical moment, the big reveal. What wonders await? A toy soldier? A peppermint stick? The one time your parents don't talk about the coal shortage. First comes the orange, a once exotic miracle of Christmas morning, now a slightly misshapen sphere that's seen better days. In modern times, an orange is just fruit. But in Victorian England, an orange is a status symbol, a sign that your family has either done well this year or pawned something important. You cradle it in your palm, gently, as if it might detonate. The skin is puckered. The color is more decaying sun than fresh citrus. But it's yours. You promise yourself you'll eat it slowly, savoring every segment before someone older, hungrier, or sneakier in the household helps you finish it. Next, you find 3 walnuts. Not shelled, mind you. These are rustic, unshelled, and so hard they could be used in light construction. Your family doesn't own a proper nutcracker, but that's what makes it a challenge. Crack them with your teeth, and you'll be visiting the barber surgeon for a festive extraction. Smash them with a heavy object, and you risk shattering both the nut and your mother's patience. It's like a holiday puzzle, except the reward is a tiny, bitter mouthful, and possibly a dental bill. The real surprise, however, is the mysterious metal contraption at the bottom. Is it a tooth scraper? A button hook? A device for extracting small rocks from your boots? Victorian parents love a practical gift. You'll use this every day, your father assures you. If you figure out what it is, you eye it warily, not entirely convinced it won't become sentient and attack you during the night. Practicality, after all, is a relative concept in a world without YouTube tutorials. There's also a small, sad piece of hard candy, a peppermint so old it could be carbon dated. You unwrap it, wondering if the white stripes were always this yellow, and try to savor it before it fuses to your molars. Sweets are a treat, but they're also a gamble. Victorian candy is basically one step removed from masonry. You suck on it, listening to the distant sound of Uncle George wheezing his way through a similar ordeal. You look around at your siblings, each clutching their own collection of existentially challenging gifts. Your brother is attempting to use his mysterious implement as a slingshot. Your sister is already weeping because her orange rolled under the sideboard and she's not allowed to move the furniture on Christmas. Everyone is hungry, but everyone is also weirdly grateful, because the alternative to a sad stocking is no stocking at all, a fate reserved for truly unlucky or deeply unremarkable children. Victorian parents watch with the satisfaction of people who survived their own childhoods on even less. It builds character, they say, which is British for we had it worse, and you're welcome. You nod, say thank you, and marvel at how, in this household, emotional resilience and a strong jaw are the only things more prized than an actual toy. As the fire sputters and your orange begins to shrivel in the unheated parlor, you tuck your stocking treasures away. Christmas has only just begun. Breakfast will be a cold slice of bread and maybe, if you're lucky, a bite of the orange you've been assigned for character building. And in true Victorian fashion, you smile. Because that's what people do when existential dread and mild scurvy are just part of the holiday spirit. Getting an orange meant you were basically royalty, imported, expensive, and more likely to mold than be eaten. The Christmas orange was the iPhone of its time, except more nutritious and less likely to survive till January. To hold a Christmas orange in Victorian England is to possess not just a fruit, but a symbol, one bright, fragrant sphere that announces to your entire extended family, we are moving up in the world, or at least that's the narrative. You stare at your orange with awe. This isn't the kind of fruit that shows up in school lunchboxes. This is a luxury good, a winter miracle. The sort of thing that could make the neighbor children jealous enough to mount a full-scale window-pressing reconnaissance mission just to see if you really got one. You don't just eat the orange. That would be wasteful. That would be almost sacrilegious. No. First you admire it, turn it over in your hands, show it to your siblings, who try very hard to act like they're not plotting a late-night heist on your side of the bedroom. The orange sits on the mantel, catching the weak December sunlight, next to a lump of coal and the family's one surviving candlestick. Every time you pass by, you give it a little nudge, just to reassure yourself that yes, you're still among the fruit-privileged. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the orange's backstory. It's traveled farther than you ever will. Plucked from a sun-soaked grove in Spain, packed in straw, bounced along on a series of increasingly cold and questionable carts, and finally deposited at the local grocer's for an amount of money your father won't discuss. It's the original globetrotter, the edible world traveler, the only thing in the room with more stamps on its passport than your Uncle Albert. When you finally, reverently, decide to eat it, it becomes a ceremonial event. The family gathers around, silent and expectant. You dig your thumb into the peel. The scent is so bright and alive that it's almost suspicious. Has anything in your home ever smelled this fresh? You carefully separate the segments. If you're feeling generous, you'll share a slice with your youngest sibling, who immediately drops it on the floor and begins wailing. This is a normal part of the tradition. Of course, you don't finish it in one sitting. The wise Victorian child stretches the orange across several days, or at least as long as the encroaching mold will allow. A segment at breakfast, another at supper, maybe one secret bite while pretending to look for firewood. You guard the orange like a dragon with treasure, checking daily to ensure that your brother hasn't swapped it for a potato-painted orange. Sometimes, you even save the peel. Victorians, being allergic to waste, will dry orange peels on the hearth, hang them as decorations, or boil them with sugar for a kind of candy that tastes mostly of bitterness and hope. If you're truly creative, you might even poke cloves into it to make a pomander, a fragrant, wrinkly sphere that looks like the world's oldest snack, but smells oddly festive. For the rest of the winter, you will remind people about the orange. Whenever a visitor appears, you will gesture casually toward the mantel or the empty spot where the orange once sat, and let them draw their own conclusions. You are now the kind of person who receives oranges at Christmas. Practically landed gentry. And as January approaches, and your orange finally gives up the ghost, replaced by shriveled skin and memories, you reflect on the journey. To have tasted something so rare, so juicy, so briefly perfect, it's enough to get you through another cold Victorian winter. At least until next Christmas, when the cycle of citrus longing and social climbing starts all over again. You unwrap a metal hoop and stick, Victorian, for enjoy your new blunt force trauma generator. Toys weren't designed for safety. They were designed to teach kids about pain and, sometimes, physics. Let's take a moment to appreciate the Victorian approach to child development. Today's toys come with rounded corners, warning labels, and a team of lawyers hiding inside the box. In Victorian times, the warning label was simply survive. The principle was simple. If the toy doesn't maim you, it's probably not challenging enough. Your new metal hoop and stick set is a prime example. It's the iPad of the 1880s, except it can chip teeth and build character at the same time. You grip the cold iron hoop, slightly warped, possibly repurposed from a wagon wheel, and the sturdy wooden stick, which has the grainy texture of a cricket bat, that's been through 5 bad marriages. The goal, you're told, is to roll the hoop down the street while chasing it and whacking it to keep it upright. If this sounds simple, that's because you haven't tried it in the company of other Victorian children, icy cobblestones, or several chickens with no respect for human innovation. The first lesson the hoop and stick delivers is about pain. The stick slips. The hoop veers sharply and slams into your shin. You discover that physics hurts. A good Victorian toy provides not just entertainment, but also an ongoing opportunity for bruising, dental emergencies, and public humiliation. It's a sort of playground Darwinism. You don't win, you survive. Nearby, your siblings unwrap their own treasures. Little Emily gets a jack in the box that launches so aggressively it could unseat a bishop. Your older brother receives a wooden spinning top sharp enough to double as a caltrop in wartime. And of course, someone gets marbles. Because nothing says family fun like tiny glass balls rolling underfoot, waiting to send an unsuspecting aunt into the coal scuttle. Safety isn't even a concept yet. The only time you hear the word caution is when your grandmother warns you about playing too close to the fire, which is fair, considering that half the household toys require some form of open flame to function. There are miniature cook stoves, tiny lanterns, and chemistry sets with instructions that basically say try not to explode. And don't forget the toy soldiers made of lead, painted in real arsenic green. If you suck on one long enough, your next Christmas might be spent as a ghost, and yet you're having fun, because fun in the Victorian era is built on the precipice of disaster. You and your friends organize impromptu hoop races down the lane, dodging carts, geese, and the inevitable pile of horse manure. The street becomes an obstacle course. The first child to drop the hoop or cry is the designated sickly cousin for the day. You are in competition with everyone and everything. Your neighbors, your environment, your own sense of self-preservation. If you manage to keep the hoop upright for a full minute, you experience genuine joy, an accomplishment matched only by the feeling of avoiding tetanus. You chase, you fall, you learn. You develop quick reflexes and the ability to explain suspicious injuries to adults who mostly respond with, "Well, don't do that again." After hours of running, colliding, and nearly losing an eye to your brother's ambitious top spinning, you limp home for supper, flushed with cold air and the pride of survival. Maybe you have a new bruise. Maybe you've learned a little about balance and a lot about pain. Either way, you're already planning your next hoop adventure. In Victorian England, that's what passes for fun. And somehow, you can't wait to do it all again tomorrow. In the end, the best Victorian toy isn't the one that stays in one piece. It's the one that leaves you with a good story and most of your original teeth. And that's a holiday memory you'll never forget. Mostly because the scar is permanent. Victorian dolls stare into your soul with glassy eyes and porcelain faces. You get a new one this year, and you're pretty sure it remembers everything you did last Christmas. The doll is exquisite. By Victorian standards, hand-painted cheeks, tiny leather shoes, a dress made from actual human labor, and hair that feels far too real to be comforting. You pick her up. She is heavier than you expect, like she's been filled not just with sawdust, but with grudges. Her blue eyes do not blink. Instead, they reflect every candle flicker in the room, following your movements with the dedication of a particularly judgmental house cat. There's a reason Victorian children slept lightly. It wasn't the cold or the drafts or the fact that you were sharing a mattress with 4 siblings and a family of mice. It was the dolls. The dolls always watched, propped in a corner chair, perched on a shelf. Or, if your parents are feeling especially chaotic, tucked right in the bed beside you. So you wake up to an expression that says, "I know about the orange you hid in the coal bin." This year's model comes with her own accessories. A tiny parasol, a faintly sinister bonnet, and a miniature handkerchief. The craftsmanship is impressive, but there's something deeply unsettling about holding a doll whose expression seems to shift depending on the light. One moment, she looks like she's about to invite you to tea. The next, she looks like she's going to tell the vicar about the thing you did to the Christmas pudding. Of course, this is not your first encounter with the uncanny doll brigade. The shelf in your bedroom already holds several. Some are missing limbs. One has a cracked face that makes her look like she's been through more family drama than you. Each one has a different secret. A stain no one can identify. A wig that never stays on. Eyes that should close when you lie her down, but don't. Victorian doll technology. Impressive, but sometimes too ambitious. Your parents assure you the dolls are a sign of love and prosperity. Porcelain is expensive. A doll says, "We care about you enough to purchase a small humanoid with the capacity to unsettle an entire parish." Your friends are envious, at least in daylight. At night, no one admits to enjoying the company of their dolls. But no one dares move them either. There are tales, whispered under itchy blankets, about what happens when you hide a doll in the wardrobe. "She'll come back," your older brother says. They always do. The worst are the sleepwalkers, siblings who wake up, eyes wide, and start rearranging the dolls for maximum horror. You've woken up more than once with all the dolls lined up at the end of your bed, staring in silent, unblinking union. In the flickering gaslight, they appear to breathe. You consider asking your parents if you can trade your doll for a live goose or even a nice lump of coal. But there is an upside. The dolls are unbreakable allies against nosy siblings. If you set the new one atop your stash of sweets, no one dares get close. She's a tiny, immobile security guard, and during especially long winter nights, you might even confess your secrets to her, as long as you can stand her silent, slightly disapproving stare. Still, when the lights go out and the house settles into creaking, hissing quiet, you feel those glass eyes lingering. You wrap the blanket tighter, careful to leave her face uncovered, because you heard somewhere it's bad luck to make a Victorian doll angry. You sleep lightly, knowing tomorrow she'll be right there, waiting to remind you, "I saw what you did, and I remember." In the end, the doll is the perfect Victorian gift, a mix of love, craftsmanship, and existential dread. Merry Christmas. Sleep tight. Paint sets contain real arsenic for that extra creative edge. The colors are vivid, and so are the possible side effects. If you're lucky, you'll only hallucinate while coloring. It's Christmas, and you've unwrapped a bright little box of watercolor paints. Your parents beam, proud that you've received something educational and cultured. The Victorians believe art builds character, broadens the mind, and, apparently, tests your resistance to heavy metals. You pop open the tin. Inside are cakes of dazzling green, fiery red, and butter yellow, the kind of colors not seen in nature, or at least, not in nature that survives very long. If you're very lucky, there's even a tiny brush included, made from the fur of some animal you'd rather not picture. You admire your new set. The green paint in particular is brilliant. It's the color of envy, new leaves, and, as modern chemists would later discover, pure arsenic. That's right. The Victorians loved their Shields green, a pigment so vibrant, so eye-catching, that it made everything from wallpaper to candies to fine art glow with radioactive cheer. No one is worried about side effects. In fact, a little tingling in the fingertips is simply the price of genius. You dip your brush in water, swish it through the jewel-like cakes, and start painting a charming holiday scene. Maybe a house with a smoking chimney, or a smiling family gathered around a tree. Within minutes, you've smudged bright colors all over your hands, sleeves, and face. Paint is bright, everywhere. You've managed to get some in your mouth, of course. That's how you know you're really an artist. Across the room, your siblings are also getting creative. Someone is finger painting with alizarin crimson, a red dye loaded with mercury. Your little brother is already licking the end of his brush to make a point. You want to stop him, but you're busy hallucinating a choir of singing oranges floating above the hearth. The paints are working their magic. The grown-ups don't worry. Victorian medical science is firmly in its rub some whiskey on it and walk it off phase. If a child turns an odd shade of green, well, that just means they're absorbing culture. You sneeze, and a tiny puff of blue pigment floats into the air. It lands in your tea. You drink it anyway. Waste not, want not. The color payoff is excellent. Your artwork is the brightest thing in the house. More vivid than the fire. More dazzling than the sad baubles hanging on the tree. The arsenic green makes the holly leap off the page, and the mercury red positively glows. You admire your finished painting, only to realize your fingertips have gone slightly numb. Maybe you just need to shake them out, or maybe you need to sit down for a while. It's hard to tell with Victorian health standards. Art is a family affair. Your mother suggests making homemade Christmas cards to send to Aunt Edna. You spend an hour painting a cheerful robin that looks increasingly menacing as the colors blend. The card is finished, licked, and sealed, possibly the most hazardous piece of mail Aunt Edna will ever receive. It's a work of love and low-level chemical warfare. Later, you hang your masterpiece on the wall, right next to the wallpaper that matches your paints. Yes, it's the same arsenic-infused shade of green. The whole room practically glows in the twilight. You feel proud, dizzy, and oddly inspired. If you're lucky, you'll live to see your painting admired by future generations, or at least until someone invents safer crayons. But until then, you savor your holiday art, set for what it truly is, a test of creativity, endurance, and the unbreakable optimism of children armed with mildly toxic gifts. In Victorian times, art really is pain, sometimes literally. You unwrap little Harriet learns to listen. a book where every page contains a new warning about the wages of naughtiness, disobedience, and smiling on a Sunday. Merry Christmas, you're already in trouble. Victorian literature for children is less about entertainment and more about early intervention. This is not a storybook designed to spark joy or teach you about the importance of sharing. No, this is a book with an agenda, to remind you that every minor error in judgment will haunt you until your dying breath. You haven't even finished your orange. And already the book's cover illustration, a girl sitting perfectly upright, with hair smoother than a church pew, warns you. This could have been you, if only you'd listened. You flip through the pages, scanning the tales. There's Timothy and the Broken Teacup, a cautionary epic in which a single moment of carelessness leads to a lifetime of regret, ostracism, and possibly exile to a boarding school with aggressive geese. Every story has the same structure. A child ignores adult advice, disaster ensues, and the final paragraph is a somber lecture from an elder whose eyebrows are so formidable they deserve a chapter of their own. Little Harriet is the star of the show. In chapter 1, she giggles in church. By page 3, she is already being eyed by a minister with the look of someone choosing between a stern talking to and eternal damnation. By the middle of the book, Harriet has forgotten to curtsy properly, spoken out of turn, and considered, though not committed, the crime of coveting her friend's slightly shinier shoes. The lesson is clear. You're being watched, not just by adults, but by God, the Queen, and probably the family doll. The illustrations do nothing to soften the blow. Every child is depicted mid-transgression, stained pinafores, untidy hair, one sock forever drooping. The expressions are a masterclass in regret. There's no adventure, no magic, only the creeping certainty that somewhere, somehow, you will disappoint someone, and it will make it into the next edition. You try to read with enthusiasm, but it's hard when every sentence is a gentle scolding. Harriet forgot to say thank you. Harriet tripped and tore her dress. Harriet used her left hand to eat her pudding. The moral of the story: Harriet is doomed, and you probably are too. There's even a helpful list of virtues for young readers in the back, which reads suspiciously like your mother's daily complaints. You glance around the room. Your siblings are unwrapping their own morality books. Obedient Oliver and the Tale of the Lost Mittens. Susan's silence is rewarded. And the ever-popular The Boy Who Laughed Too Loud. It's a literary parade of cautionary tales and collective anxiety. The adults watch with satisfaction, hoping you'll absorb at least one lesson and stop feeding your goose biscuits under the table. You try to look grateful as you hold up your new book. "Thank you, Aunt Mildred," you say, ignoring the way she nods approvingly from across the room. She is the family's leading supplier of guilt-laden literature and believes that a child with too much cheer is a child headed for ruin. Later, you sneak a look at a real storybook hidden under your mattress. A tale of pirates or magical cats. Just to remind yourself that the world is not all disapproval and lessons. But for now, it's back to little Harriet and her relentless quest for moral perfection. By the time you close the book, you are more careful, quieter, and possibly convinced that any joy you feel must be balanced with a suitable amount of remorse. You tuck yourself into bed with the book beside you, hoping to dream of a world where fun isn't always followed by consequence. In the glow of the dying fire, you realize that in Victorian England, Christmas gifts don't just keep on giving, they keep on judging too. Christmas crackers burst open with a sound louder than your will to live, showering you with tiny toys, bad jokes, and just enough gunpowder to keep things interesting. It's not truly Christmas in the Victorian era until someone risks hearing loss for the sake of holiday cheer. The cracker is a marvel of Victorian engineering, part party favour, part munitions test, part cautionary tale. The anticipation is half the fun. and half the reason you're now sitting 3 feet away from your little brother, who's wielding his cracker with all the confidence of a child who's never read a single safety manual. The Victorian cracker, for those who've never experienced its power, is a paper tube twisted at both ends, containing a tiny strip of explosive gunpowder and a collection of surprises that range from delightfully odd to legally questionable. To open it, you must pull on one end while a family member, usually the most competitive, grabs the other, both of you bracing for the telltale snap that could signal anything from minor celebration to imminent property damage. You grip your end. Someone shouts, "Ready!" and you pull. The cracker detonates with a bang that echoes through the frosty sitting room, sending the family cat under the sofa and rattling the window panes. A faint smell of burned paper and triumph hangs in the air. Out tumbles the bounty. A flimsy paper crown, a plastic mustache, a riddle printed so faintly it might as well be a secret code, and a tiny spinning top designed to break by Boxing Day. You dutifully place the paper crown on your head. It immediately tears, droops, or migrates sideways, transforming you from Christmas royalty to someone who lost a fight with a tissue box. The rest of your family follows suit, so the room now looks like a papier-mâché convention of badly disguised monarchs, all squinting at the cryptic jokes in the cracker slips. Why did the goose cross the road? To get away from Christmas pudding. You groan, but secretly admire the effort. A good cracker joke is like a Victorian meal, best consumed quickly and not examined too closely. The real gamble is always the toy. Sometimes it's a metal puzzle you'll lose within hours. Sometimes it's a whistle loud enough to cause a small diplomatic incident with the neighbors. One memorable year, it was a set of miniature scissors that gave your cousin a new appreciation for the concept of supervision. The adults are unfazed. This is character building, after all. It's not just the noise that makes crackers legendary. It's the communal chaos. Everyone participates, from the youngest child to the most stoic grandfather. Even your Aunt Mildred, who claims to hate surprises, lines up to risk mild combustion for the thrill of a paper hat and a pun about turnips. The whole experience is a test of reflexes, luck, and the household's collective tolerance for minor singeing. For a few moments, the room is filled with laughter, torn wrapping paper, and the flicker of candlelight bouncing off shiny cracker prizes. You tuck your treasures away, brush a bit of gunpowder residue from your sleeves, and try to pretend you didn't flinch when the last cracker exploded with the enthusiasm of a small cannon. You feel a warm glow, the kind that comes from shared danger and the knowledge that, for once, the worst thing that's happened is a bad joke and a lost crown. As the excitement fades and the air clears, you realize the Victorian Christmas cracker is the perfect holiday metaphor. It's loud, surprising, a little hazardous, and nobody knows exactly what's inside. You glance around at your paper-hatted family, feeling a little closer to everyone, or maybe that's just the gunpowder talking. Either way, you've survived another round of Victorian merriment. And that's something worth celebrating. Quietly, of course, until your ears stop ringing. Handmade gifts from relatives are legendary for their scratchiness. You receive mittens so itchy they double as exfoliants and a scarf that can stand up on its own. You spot the package as soon as you wake up. It's got that unmistakable shape and that faint, lingering scent of lavender, mothballs, and old hope. A blend only achieved by the hands of an aunt who hasn't seen you in person since you had all your baby teeth. The wrapping is lumpy and uneven, stitched together with more tape than paper, and you can practically feel the static charge building up before you even untie the bow. With everyone watching, you tug at the string, peel back the layers, and reveal what could charitably be called a festive scarf and mittens set. The colors are bold, if slightly mismatched, with one end of the scarf significantly wider than the other, giving it the aerodynamic properties of a windsock. The mittens, for their part, are an adventure in experimental knitting. One appears built for a hand twice your size, the other for a hand that's never seen a day of honest work. You gamely try them on. The sensation is immediate. It's not just scratchy, it's weaponized. The fibers scrape across your skin with the tenacity of 1,000 tiny brooms. If you concentrate hard enough, you're pretty sure you can sand down a callus just by flexing your fingers. You can only imagine the sheep these came from, rugged, possibly angry. Definitely not interested in producing soft, luxurious wool. Everyone in the family insists on a turn feeling the scarf, as if verifying that yes, it is somehow both soft and sharp. Your mother suggests it will wear in, a Victorian phrase meaning will eventually become slightly less hostile, possibly after several years of exposure to rain, snow, and tears. Your father assures you that homemade gifts are best because they're made with love. You're not sure love is supposed to leave visible red marks. Aunt Edna herself beams from her chair in the corner, taking in the scene. She's already working on next year's project, needles flashing in the firelight like a pair of judgmental swords. You try to smile, but your cheeks itch just thinking about what horrors await in the post next December. You wrap the scarf around your neck. It's so long it could double as a tow rope in a pinch. With enough layers, you're protected from the cold, sure, but also from meaningful human contact. Any would-be holiday hugger will have to get past the woolen barricade first. You slip on the mittens, grateful for the thick lining. Even if it feels like your hands are now encased in medieval loofahs. Out you go, bundled up for the holiday walk, scarf trailing behind you like the world's scratchiest comet. The mittens work, sort of. You can't feel your fingers, but at least you're not getting frostbite. There's a special resilience to be gained from Aunt Edna's knitting, a knowledge that if you can survive this, you can survive anything. Even another round of her improved balaclava next year. Throughout the day, you field compliments and sympathetic looks. Everyone's got an Aunt Edna, or they've been an Aunt Edna themselves. It's a rite of passage, a way to say, I care about you enough to risk your epidermis. And when the scarf sheds enough fibers to assemble a small hamster, you pick them up, stuff them back in your pocket, and keep going. In the end, you discover a surprising truth. The scratchy scarf and mittens are a kind of superpower. You're warmer, tougher, and far less likely to be mugged by local wildlife. You might even survive the winter. And, just maybe, you'll come to cherish the way Aunt Edna's love leaves its mark, literally. Victorian toys love fire. Your new tin stove comes with instructions like light and hope for the best. The smell of scorched eyebrows signals it's Christmas in full swing. You're not sure when Christmas became synonymous with open flames, but here you are, cradling a gift that is essentially a tiny metal furnace. The box proudly announces it as an educational cookery set for young ladies and gentlemen. Inside, a tin stove, a handful of doll-sized pans, a packet of mysterious fuel tablets, and a user manual that's less a set of instructions and more a gentle suggestion to make your peace with the local fire brigade. Your parents, beaming, trusting, and perhaps dangerously optimistic, watch as you assemble the contraption. You set the stove on the cold hearth, far from the curtains, but not far enough from the family dog, who eyes the proceedings with the wariness of someone who's seen last year's chemistry set incident. The fuel tablets rattle in your palm, promising either holiday magic or a future as a cautionary tale. The first step, insert tablet, ignite tablet. No mention of safety goggles, fireproof gloves, or a responsible adult. This is Victorian England, where child safe is a concept yet to be invented. You light the tablet, and instantly, A sickly sweet smell fills the air, a scent halfway between boiled toffee and chemical regret. The tiny stove flickers to life, flames dancing merrily beneath the minuscule kettle. With the stove ablaze, you're encouraged to prepare a simple treat. Your siblings gather round, all eager to sample whatever culinary delight you can coax from the toy's thimble-sized saucepan. You attempt to boil water. The water hisses and spits, filling the room with a fine spray of steam and the lingering aroma of scorched ambition. The kettle rattles ominously, daring you to touch its glowing metal surface. You resist, remembering the wisdom gained from your cousin's adventures with the toy blacksmith forged 2 Christmases ago. In the background, the grown-ups swap stories of their own fiery childhoods, uncles who lost eyebrows to experimental tallow candles, aunts who learned the hard way that crinoline and open flames are a poor combination. It's practically a family tradition, the passing down of burn scars and heroic tales of survival. Christmas, after all, is about making memories, and sometimes about making them quickly, before the smoke alarm, if you have one, starts to shriek. The dog has left the room. Sensible. You attempt to toast bread by balancing a slice on the miniature grate. The result: one end is as hard as coal, the other still bread. You try your hand at making cocoa, only to discover that tiny pans have an impressive ability to reach volcanic temperatures. You set the mug down, blow on your hands, and try to look cheerful, if slightly pink around the edges. Soon, the entire room smells of singed hair and overcooked hope. Your little brother, emboldened, tries to fry an egg the size of a postage stamp. The egg fuses to the pan with the permanence of Victorian morals. A wisp of black smoke curls lazily to the ceiling. "It's just steam," your mother insists, wafting a hand, eyes watering. The Victorians were used to it. As you survey the chaos, a half-melted saucepan, a scorched treat, the faint outline of a toast-shaped ghost on the wall, you realize this is the true spirit of a Victorian holiday, learning through near disaster. In the end, you've managed not to set the house on fire, and everyone still has their eyebrows. You've also, incredibly, produced something vaguely edible. For one brief, sooty moment, you are a culinary pioneer. You blow out the stove, wipe your hands on the itchy scarf Aunt Edna made, and vow to keep your next experiment safely in the garden. Victorian Christmas toys, not just gifts, adventures in survival. You unwrap a charming brooch featuring the fully taxidermied body of a robin. Victorians loved a good animal accessory, living or otherwise. It's not enough, in the Victorian era, to decorate yourself with a tasteful bit of ribbon or a nice cameo. The true mark of fashion is to walk into a holiday gathering with a small, deceased bird pinned boldly to your lapel. Nothing says festive quite like the frozen, glassy gaze of a robin who definitely didn't ask to be part of your winter ensemble. This Christmas, your well-meaning aunt has outdone herself. She beams as you unwrap your gift, a box lined with faded velvet and the faint smell of camphor. Inside, nestled among yellowed tissue, is a brooch the size of a teacup, and at its center, an entire robin, wings artfully splayed and tiny feet neatly tucked. Its beak is delicately open, as if caught in a final note of song or protest. The pin on the back is sturdy enough to double as a small weapon, which, in Victorian England, is always a bonus. Fashionable Victorians are obsessed with all things natural. And nothing is more natural, apparently, than taking taxidermy on the go. You've seen the trend around town. Ladies with hats sporting stuffed hummingbirds, gentlemen with beetle tie pins, and children with tiny mice posed mid-frolic atop their mufflers. There is a certain logic to it. Nature is beautiful, so why not wear it? Preferably before it decomposes. The robin brooch, though, is a status symbol. Robins are a favorite Victorian motif, representing luck, renewal, and a subtle flex that your family can afford ornaments with actual feathers. You pin it to your collar, the bird's tiny feet brushing your skin, and try to ignore the way its glass eyes seem to follow you. There's always a faint worry that the spirit of the bird is hovering nearby, judging your every action. But that's part of the charm, apparently. In a house full of children and pets, you learn quickly to keep your new accessory out of reach. Siblings are fascinated, reaching out to poke the bird's wings, while the family cat regards it as either a rival or lunch. You walk through the parlor with a new sense of gravitas. Everyone can see you're both trendy and a little bit unhinged. Your mother fusses over you, making sure the brooch is centered and the feathers fluffed. She's secretly pleased. Nothing says well-connected family like a child weighed down by decorative wildlife. Your grandmother reminisces about her own youthful collection. Larks for everyday wear, a magpie for Sunday best, and, on one ill-advised occasion, a full bat tied to her hair. The Victorians, it seems, never met a natural wonder they didn't want to pin, mount, or hang on the wall. Of course, taxidermy comes with its own hazards. There's the persistent aroma of preservatives, the occasional loss of a feather, and the ever-present threat that someone might ask you to freshen up your accessory with a dab of eau de cologne. Nothing says confidence like being mistaken for a portable aviary. Still, you must admit, there is a certain holiday magic in the absurdity of it all. The robin, once a symbol of winter's resilience, now perched stoically on your person, reminds everyone of the fragile line between elegance and eccentricity. You find yourself admiring its tiny craftsmanship, the careful work that went into preserving each detail, right down to the glint in its little eyes. As you settle in for Christmas dinner, the brooch is the star of the show. Relatives ooh and ah, children ask nervous questions, and somewhere, the family goose sighs in relief that at least it wasn't chosen for this year's wearable art. You smile politely, stroking the robin's downy head, and realize, in Victorian England, the best gifts are equal parts fashion statement, conversation piece, and mild haunting. Father presents you with a child-sized taxidermy set, complete with pins, sawdust, and the unspoken expectation you'll practice on something recently deceased. It's the Victorian age, and nothing says Merry Christmas quite like a kit designed for preserving the beauty of small animals who have, regrettably, shuffled off their mortal coil. The box, handsomely made and smelling faintly of mothballs and ambition, contains a set of tools more intimidating than anything you've seen outside a doctor's bag. There are shiny needles, several sizes of pins, packets of glass eyes, choose your own unsettling expression, a tiny wooden mallet, and a generous bag of sawdust that leaks into every other present on the rug. Father, in his wisdom, announces that learning taxidermy is an important skill for a modern Victorian youth. After all, you never know when the urge to preserve a squirrel or immortalize a garden mouse will strike. He gestures grandly toward your first project, an unfortunately expired sparrow, sourced, you suspect, from the same aunt who gave you that brooch last year. You look into the bird's lifeless eyes and consider your options. Feigning illness would only result in a brisk walk and a lecture on the benefits of fresh air. There are instructions, but in true Victorian style, they are written for someone who has either dissected half the countryside or grown up in a natural history museum. First, make an incision from the base of the sternum it begins, as if you should know where that is. You select a needle, try not to wince, and remind yourself that this is technically a bonding activity. Mother watches from a safe distance, nervously darning socks and muttering about the smell. The first step is always the hardest. You manage to pin the bird to a tiny wooden board as instructed, and gingerly begins stuffing it with sawdust. This, you're told, is restoring its natural plumpness. In reality, it's more like trying to refill a pastry with gravel while being judged by every ancestor whose portrait hangs in the hallway. You choose some glass eyes, slightly mismatched, because who among us isn't, and pop them in. The result is unsettling. The sparrow now stares back at you with the expression of a shopkeeper who suspects you've stolen a sweet. By midday, the kitchen table is covered in a fine layer of feathers, wood, shavings, and existential dread. Your siblings, initially eager to help, are now helping by arguing about which household pet will be next. The cat has not been seen since breakfast. Your older brother suggests you add a festive ribbon around the bird's neck. You're not sure if this improves things or simply adds to the overall air of avian confusion. Father, inspecting your handiwork, offers a hearty clap on the back and a reminder that practice makes perfect. He gestures toward the garden, where the potential for future projects seems limitless. Frogs, voles, perhaps a hedgehog if you're feeling ambitious. Nature, preserved by our very own hands, he proclaims, with a flourish that knocks the sawdust bag off the table and onto the dog. By the time you're finished, your bird is unique. It leans to one side, one wing at a rakish angle, and the eyes, now slightly lopsided, gleam with the secret knowledge of all badly executed craft projects. You set it on the mantel beside your robin brooch and wonder if it's polite to name your creations after distant relatives. As evening falls, your family admires the result. "It's something," says Mother, ever diplomatic, and in the flickering candlelight, you realize that the Victorian spirit is less about perfection and more about persistence, messes, and the joy of saying, "I made this, and nobody died today." And if you happen to have nightmares about glass-eyed birds, well, that's just the cost of a proper Victorian Christmas. Your Christmas card features a frog riding a goat and Santa looking like he just lost a custody battle. Victorian cards. For when you want to confuse and unsettle the recipient, it's that special moment on Christmas morning. You reach for the seasonal envelope, hoping for a little peace, joy, and perhaps a snowflake or two. Instead, you're greeted by a tableau so surreal it would make Salvador Dali request a cup of tea and a nap. Victorian Christmas cards are infamous for their commitment to confusing the living daylights out of everyone, from the postman to your great-aunt. You examine the front. At first glance, it's festive. A border of holly, a splash of red and green. But then your eyes focus on the main attraction. A life-size toad in a waistcoat, solemnly steering a goat through a snowstorm. On the horizon, two turnips exchange knowing glances. There is, for reasons you can't begin to guess, a baby in a teacup waving a tiny flag labeled December Joy. You stare at the card. The card stares back. It's not just you. All across Victorian England, families are trading cards that range from the mildly puzzling to the outright alarming. Some feature insects in hats. Others depict anthropomorphic fruits, engaging in activities that would get a stern letter from the church if anyone ever explained them. Santa Claus is everywhere, but never quite right, sometimes with the eyes of a man who's seen too many mince pies, sometimes with a beard that looks detachable. These cards weren't made for the faint of heart. Victorians, for all their reputation of restraint and propriety, apparently harbored an intense love for the bizarre. Holiday cards were less about tidings of comfort and joy, and more about testing the recipient's grasp on reality. One popular motif: dead birds, surrounded by garlands. Nothing says Merry Christmas like a robin sprawled in a festive tableau, surrounded by weeping beetles. You can't make this up, mostly because you wouldn't dare. The captions don't help. Under your frog-goat extravaganza, A solemn script reads, "Best wishes for a season of unusual delights." You wonder if this is a threat, a prophecy, or simply the result of someone mixing up the order at the print shop. Your siblings compare cards. One gets a group of mice singing carols to a cat with a monocle. Another has Santa piloting a zeppelin shaped like a ham. Your mother tucks hers into the mirror frame, right next to last year's card, featuring a choir of onions, all singing with their mouths wide open. You try to imagine the creative process behind these masterpieces. Somewhere, in a chilly printworks in London, an artist sits hunched over their drawing board, fueled by weak tea and existential dread. What shall I draw today? Ah, yes, 2 frogs fencing with candy canes and a walrus in a bonnet. You can only assume the brief was, make it festive, but make it weird. Victorian relatives embrace the confusion. Great Aunt Millicent is thrilled to receive a card featuring a dancing cabbage and writes back, "Thank you, dearest, the cabbage brought tears to my eyes." You wonder if she's being polite, or if the family simply comes from a long line of surrealists. Eventually, you grow strangely fond of the oddity. There's something comforting in the sheer randomness. A reminder that even in an age of straight-laced manners and tight collars, people found a way to let their imaginations run wild. The cards are kept on the mantle, a year-round reminder that Christmas is a time for both comfort and confusion. So you tuck your frog and goat card into your bedside drawer. If you're lucky, it'll visit you in your dreams, and you'll finally know what December joy really means. But if not, at least you know Victorian Christmas cards have done their job, keeping you both entertained and slightly unsettled well into the new year. You receive coal in your stocking, not as a punishment, but because it's genuinely valuable. For a few minutes, you feel like the luckiest child in a freezing neighborhood. It's a truth universally acknowledged, at least in Victorian England, that a child in want of a warm home will happily trade their pride for a handful of good, honest coal. The modern world might laugh at the idea, a lump of coal as a present. But you know better. You know the real meaning of joy is not a shiny toy or a peppermint stick, but a black, crumbly chunk that promises not to judge you, only to burn brightly and maybe, if you're lucky, keep your toes attached through the winter. You run your fingers over the rough, dusty surface. It leaves a satisfying black streak on your palm, the kind of mark that says, "I am practical, I am prepared, and I have access to one of the hottest commodities on the block." You can't wait to show it off to your siblings, who will be both envious and hopeful that you might share, until you remember sharing means less time basking in the precious glow for yourself. Everyone gathers around the hearth, which at this point is less roaring fire and more lukewarm memory. The single log in the grate has been clinging to life since last night, and your mother is already eyeing the coal in your hand with a mixture of approval and subtle calculation. "That'll see us through the morning," she says, and you feel a swell of pride. Forget being naughty. This is the Victorian dream. Your family will toast bread and dry their socks thanks to your seasonal good fortune. There's no disappointment here, no pouting or feigned gratitude. A lump of coal means you'll have a warm breakfast, or at least less cold porridge. You can almost imagine what it must feel like to be truly wealthy, to have baskets of the stuff lined up in the cellar, ready to fend off the endless parade of damp and chill that is a British winter. For now, your single lump is a treasure. It's a little slice of security in a world built on drafty windows and distant promises. Of course, the legend goes that coal is for the children who've misbehaved, the naughty ones, the cheeky ones. But in your house, everyone knows that's a lie parents tell to make themselves feel powerful. If you're really unlucky, you get nothing. If you're lucky, you get coal, and maybe, just maybe, a secret nod from the universe that you've done something right, or at least something useful. Your younger siblings crowd around, eager for their turn to hold the lump and imagine themselves lords of the manor, stoking a grand fireplace with endless fuel. There's a ceremony to it, the choosing of the right time, the slow walk to the hearth, the careful placement on the embers. The room fills with anticipation, and with it, the faintest whiff of hope. The coal hisses and pops, a sound more festive than any carol. Later, when the fire is crackling at last and everyone is huddled close, you watch the flickering shadows and feel a sense of satisfaction no expensive bauble could ever bring. The warmth creeps into your bones, and for a moment, it's easy to forget the drafts, the chill, the endless scraping for warmth. All that matters is the coal, your coal, and the small miracle it brings to the middle of winter. So while some children might scoff at such a humble gift, you know the truth. In a Victorian Christmas, nothing is more welcome, more prized, or more practical. It's the gift that literally keeps on giving, at least until the next cold snap. And as your family basks in its glow, you smile. Because sometimes, the best presents are the ones that don't glitter, but glow. The Victorian Science Exploration Box includes matches, chemicals, and a strong encouragement to experiment. The house insurance premium just went up. There's nothing quite like the thrill of Christmas morning and the knowledge that, in a few short hours, you'll be trusted with a set of supplies that, in modern times, would be reserved for a licensed chemist or, at the very least, a character in a cautionary tale. You tear open the festive paper, and there it is, the Science Exploration Box, an adventure in learning, danger, and parental denial. The box itself is a marvel. Sturdy cardboard painted with heroic children in tiny lab coats, beaming with the kind of confidence only possible when you don't yet understand the concept of flammable vapor. Inside, nestled in straw and hope, are vials and bottles, tiny jars of sulfur, potassium nitrate, and mystery powder, with a label that simply reads, "Exciting results await." There's a tiny funnel, a strip of litmus paper, and, most exciting of all, a small box of actual matches. Not childproof, not tamper-resistant, just matches, with a helpful note, for adult supervision, recommended, not required. The instruction booklet is both reassuring and reckless. Step 1. Observe chemical reactions by combining items in provided glassware. Be sure to wear an apron. Step 2. Try heating solutions for additional effects. Step 3. Open window for ventilation. Step 4 is implied but never written. Remember your closest exit. You can hardly contain your excitement. Your siblings, sensing imminent disaster, are eager to join in, but only as distant observers, preferably behind a sturdy chair or from the safety of the next room. Father watches with a mixture of scientific pride and practical dread. Mother disappears, likely to move the good curtains and update the fire bucket. You pour a pinch of powder into the tiny test tube, add water from the chipped teapot, and strike a match. There is a moment of pure suspense, followed by a spectacular fizz, a wisp of smoke, and the kind of acrid smell that makes you question your life choices. You have never felt more alive. You are an inventor, an explorer, an early contender for the reason the family moves house next spring. The possibilities are endless. With each new experiment, you grow bolder, mixing different powders, lighting more matches, occasionally glancing at the instruction booklet, which cheerfully encourages you to explore the wonders of combustion. The dog flees under the sofa. The wallpaper starts to peel, not from the steam, but from the sheer force of collective family anxiety. Some experiments are less explosive but no less fascinating. You make invisible ink by mixing vinegar and soot. You discover that adding the blue salts to the yellow dust creates a color so vivid it stains both your hands and your reputation for weeks. The blue salt's whole family is called in to witness your rainbow jar, a precarious masterpiece that will, inevitably, end up on the carpet. The adults are torn between encouraging scientific curiosity and preventing a reenactment of the Great Fire of London. "Let's open a window," says father, as smoke curls gently from your bubbling beaker. "Perhaps it's time for tea," mother suggests, eyeing the nearest exit. As the sun sets and your collection of vaguely hazardous concoctions lines the mantelpiece, you feel triumphant. You have survived your first foray into Victorian science. The house is still standing, mostly. Your eyebrows remain largely intact. The air tingles with possibility, and just a hint of sulfur. In the end, you realize the Victorian science exploration box is more than a gift. It's a test of nerve, ingenuity, and household fire safety. It's a little slice of the Victorian spirit. Curious, ambitious, occasionally flammable, and absolutely unforgettable. You unwrap the game of virtue, a board game where you learn life lessons, win nothing, and end up reflecting on your failings. No dice, just shame. This isn't Monopoly or even Snakes and Ladders. This is Victorian England, where even your entertainment is a moral exercise. The game of virtue comes in a beautiful box, decorated with images of angelic children, helping the elderly, reading the Bible, and resisting the temptation of extra pudding. There's not a single dragon or pirate in sight, just saints, scholars, and several illustrations of children sitting perfectly upright in straight-backed chairs, their faces locked in eternal expressions of quiet suffering. You lay out the board on the table, its path winding from idleness to redemption. There are no flashy tokens, just small wooden markers, each painted a somber brown. The instructions are handwritten in elegant script and begin, ominously, with "May all who play this game strive for greater character." Your little brother tries to sneak in a marble as a player piece, but you catch him. This game is serious. The only thing at stake is your immortal soul. There are no dice, of course. Luck is for the godless and the French. Instead, you move your piece by answering moral dilemmas. Read aloud by the sternest relative in the room. You find a penny in the street. Do you keep it or give it to the poor? You are late to Sunday school. Do you confess or invent a tale of heroic rescue? Each answer earns you a move forward or backward. The rules are unbending. Honesty propels you toward the finish. Any whiff of mischief sends you spiraling toward repentance, or worse, family meeting. Some squares are especially perilous. Land on neglect of chores and you lose a turn to reflect on your laziness. Reach generosity and everyone claps politely while you offer up a piece of your Christmas orange, which you will definitely not get back. There's even a charitable donation square where you must hand over a real coin to the family's charity jar. You realize, too late, that your birthday money is now at risk. As you play, it becomes clear the game of virtue is less about fun and more about a subtle, slow-motion intervention. Your older sister sails ahead by admitting to harboring a kind thought, while your little brother languishes at the starting line, having rolled his eyes once too often. Mother looks on approvingly, reminding everyone that the true reward is a clean conscience. You wonder if there's a consolation prize for being the first to self-doubt. Midway through, the game's moral scenarios become oddly specific. You are tempted to read by candlelight after bedtime, endangering both your vision and the family's fire safety. What do you do? You borrow your friend's lead soldier and forget to return it. Confess, or take your secret to the grave. The guilt begins to pile up like so much Victorian coal. By the end, no one feels like a winner. The first player to reach virtue is crowned most upright child, a title that comes with no privileges except the right to set the table. Everyone else is encouraged to try harder next time. The board is quietly folded away, and the room settles into a reflective silence. You stare at your token, now stuck forever on procrastination. But there's a strange comfort to it. In the soft glow of the lamps, surrounded by family, you realize this is Victorian Christmas at its finest. A little bit of fun, a healthy dose of self-improvement, and a lingering sense of existential doubt. You stack the cards, pocket the lesson, and quietly promise to share your orange tomorrow. Maybe. And that, you realize, is the real game of virtue. Never truly over, never entirely won, but always waiting for a rematch. New clothes are always a highlight, until you realize your festive new jumper is basically medieval sandpaper sewn together by someone with unresolved issues. There it is, folded neatly under the tree, your big gift. Every year you hope for a toy or a book, but you know, deep down, that practicality always wins. The Victorians were not a people to be distracted by fleeting trends or frivolous pleasures. When it comes to Christmas, nothing says I love you quite like a sweater built for survival and possibly minor exfoliation. You pick up the jumper. It's heavy, solid, and radiating the kind of warmth you associate with freshly shorn sheep and looming disappointment. The color is best described as ambitious oatmeal with festive flecks of something that may once have been red. It's thick enough to stop a small arrow and wide enough at the neck to fit you and two friends. You can almost feel the legacy of generations of knitters working out their feelings, one aggressively tight stitch at a time. You slide it on, suppressing a wince as the wool scratches your neck and arms. There's no soft lining. Victorian children don't need luxury, just resilience. Your mother beams with pride, adjusting the sleeves, which dangle awkwardly at your wrists. The cuffs loose enough to catch soup or an opportunistic mouse. You'll grow into it, she says, as if your primary goal in life is to achieve the dimensions of a small wardrobe. The room fills with the smell of lanolin and ambition. Siblings exchange sympathetic glances, each remembering their own special jumper from years past. Your little brother's still has the shape of the knitting needles embedded in the back. Your older sister's has been patched so many times it now weighs more than she does. You're marched to the mirror for the traditional admiration ceremony. "Look how smart you are," says Aunt Agnes, whose own jumper appears to have been inspired by military surplus and garden gnomes. You try to smile, but every movement grinds another patch of wool across your skin, raising the kind of rash that's considered a rite of passage in Victorian households. The main benefit of your new clothing is, of course, warmth. The Victorian house is not so much insulated as it is loosely assembled. Drafts wander in at will. Each additional layer is a small act of rebellion against pneumonia. So you pile on socks, hand-knitted, uneven, a scarf, courtesy of Aunt Edna's knitted revenge, and a woolen cap that gives you the look of a disgruntled chimney sweep. You shuffle toward the fire, hoping to soften the jumper's texture through sheer proximity to heat. As the day wears on, you begin to appreciate the jumper's other qualities. It's sturdy enough to use as a sled should the garden freeze over. The sleeves can be tied together to restrain an overly ambitious goose. You discover it's also mildly flame retardant, a real perk, given the abundance of miniature stoves, open candles, and siblings experimenting with science kits in the parlor. Your mother, sensing your doubt, reminds you of the work that went into every stitch. Each garment is the product of long nights, sore fingers, and a stubborn refusal to waste wool, no matter how coarse. In a way, you realize your scratchy, oversized, oatmeal-colored jumper is a testament to family endurance. You're not just wearing clothes, you're wearing a story of survival. By bedtime, you're still wrapped in disappointment and at least 3 layers of knitwear. You itch, but you're warm. You ache, but you're loved. And you know that by next year, you'll have earned the right to hand down this jumper to a younger sibling, a true Victorian Christmas tradition. The gift that keeps on scratching, a Christmas goose, alive and hissing, is both a future dinner and a present you must dodge for the rest of winter. Nothing says holiday magic like poultry with a grudge. The first thing you notice is the sound. A sort of honking, hissing growl that echoes through the hallway. Before you even make it to the parlor, your father beams with pride as he presents you with your very own Christmas goose. Not a cooked one, not a tidy plucked bird arranged on a platter, but a fully feathered, highly opinionated creature with talons like knitting needles and a glare that could curdle milk. Victorian England is big on symbolism, and nothing says prosperity quite like a plump goose strutting around your house. It's supposed to be a source of pride, a living, breathing statement that your family's holiday table will, eventually, groan beneath the weight of a glorious roast. For now, though, it's a feathery ball of mayhem. You're expected to care for it, keep it from escaping into the lane, and, above all, avoid being bitten before New Year's. The goose quickly establishes itself as the alpha of the household. It marches up and down the hall, hissing at the cat, pecking at any stray sock, and making it clear that no one will be sitting comfortably for the foreseeable future. Every attempt to pet or corral it is met with furious wing flapping. You learn, quickly, to give the goose a wide berth, especially if you value your ankles or any hope of a peaceful night's sleep. Feeding the goose becomes a family project. Old crusts of bread, vegetable scraps, the occasional unfortunate insect, all are offered up as tribute. The bird is discerning, eyeing each offering with suspicion, then devouring it with the enthusiasm of someone who knows it's living on borrowed time. The adults discuss its eventual fate in hushed tones, but the goose is nobody's fool. It develops an uncanny knack for vanishing at the mere mention of roasting pans or orange sauce. Your younger siblings treat the goose like a combination of pet, security system, and vengeful spirit. They're alternately terrified and fascinated, daring each other to see who can get closest without losing a finger. At night, you hear it moving around. A soft shuffle, followed by a loud, victorious honk. It's a feathery reminder that, in this house, nothing is safe, not even bedtime. The holidays progress. Decorations are hung, carols are sung, and the goose continues its reign of domestic terror. It has a favorite spot near the hearth, where it dozes with one eye open. Every so often, it asserts its dominance by chasing your uncle from the room or launching a sneak attack on Aunt Edna's knitting bag. The family dog moves out of the kitchen entirely, preferring the icy backyard to further confrontation. As Christmas dinner approaches, the house fills with anticipation and, not a little, dread. The adults debate the logistics of the grand meal. The children wonder if the bird will somehow escape its fate, and the goose itself seems to grow larger, fluffier, and even more belligerent. When the day finally comes, there's a strange mixture of relief and nostalgia as the house returns to its natural order and your stockings fill with less animated gifts. In the end, you realize the live goose is the perfect Victorian present. Practical, slightly unhinged, and a memorable mix of comfort and chaos. It's a lesson in responsibility, a test of courage, and, for a brief shining week, a main character in your family's holiday legend. Long after it's gone, you'll remember the hissing, the honking, and the feeling that for one Victorian Christmas, you were most definitely not at the top of the pecking order. Your older brother makes you a wooden toy that looks harmless but contains exactly 3 nails and a splinter count that could be weaponized. This is the moment you dread and anticipate every year, the unveiling of your sibling's homemade surprise. It arrives unwrapped because Victorian children believe in saving paper and maximizing suspense. He beams as he presents it. A blocky wooden horse, or maybe a cart, or perhaps it's meant to be an elaborate puzzle. The design is ambiguous, the finish is rough, and the wheels have only a casual relationship with roundness. You hold it up to the light. The paint job, a heroic attempt at green, mostly covers the intended surface, but there are streaks of red, blood, paint, Christmas mystery along the edges. The toy is solid, impressively so. If you dropped it, you're pretty sure it would survive the impact, even if the floorboards wouldn't. Your brother stands by, arms folded, radiating the pride of an apprentice blacksmith. You thank him with the sincerity of someone who has already mentally mapped the nearest route to the kitchen for a first aid kit. Your parents praise the effort, calling it handcrafted and unique. They don't mention the protruding nails, or the fact that the last homemade gift resulted in a tetanus scare and an emergency visit from the village nurse. You notice your sister eyeing the toy from across the room, probably weighing her odds of repurposing it as a battering ram for next week's living room fort siege. You test the wheels. One spins with enthusiasm, one is stubbornly fixed in place, and the third, for reasons known only to the toy and the laws of physics, falls off and rolls under the piano. That's just how it's supposed to be, your brother insists, hastily reattaching it with a 4th nail produced from his pocket. You nod and resist the urge to check when your last tetanus shot might have been, if such a thing existed. The splinters are immediate and plentiful. Just holding the toy gives you a handful of new souvenirs, each one a tiny reminder that your sibling loves you enough to personally challenge your immune system. Still, there's something oddly touching about the effort. He probably spent hours in the cold shed, hammering away with hand-me-down tools and questionable supervision, crafting this hazardous hunk of wood just for you. In a way, the danger is part of the gift, a test of resilience, quick reflexes, and the family's willingness to experiment with early first aid. The rest of the day, you and your brother run trials. You race the toy across the floor, discovering that it can, in fact, reach impressive speeds, at least until it hits a loose nail and executes a pressed, dramatic somersault. You use it as a paperweight, a doorstop, and briefly as a weapon during a minor dispute over the last slice of fruitcake. When you finally manage to pry it apart, there's a secret compartment inside. A handful of rock, hard toffees, a paperclip, and a small note that reads, "Good luck." You have to admit, it's growing on you. By evening, your hands are bandaged, your pride slightly bruised, and your older brother is already planning next year's masterpiece, rumored to involve a spring mechanism and a suspicious amount of wire. You tuck the toy under your pillow, hoping for sweet dreams, and vow to keep it far from your more delicate possessions. In the end, you realize that in the Victorian spirit, the siblings' homemade toy is the perfect Christmas present, a mix of creativity, mild peril, and the unspoken promise of lifelong family stories. It's a gift that leaves a mark, literally, and reminds you that sometimes love is a little rough around the edges and always worth holding on to, even with gloves. You receive a tin whistle that can shatter glass and familial bonds. One toot, and everyone is reconsidering their commitment to Christmas. It's a shiny little thing, polished metal painted with swirls of green and red, and just the right size for a child with more enthusiasm than skill. You spot it peeking out from the top of your stocking, nestled between a lump of coal and the annual orange. For a fleeting moment, you imagine yourself as a virtuoso, the pride of the family, serenading relatives with gentle carols. Reality, of course, is about to intervene. The first note you blast into the Christmas morning air is not so much a sound as an event. Dogs howl. The cat vanishes. Aunt Edna's teacup shudders in her hand. The whistle's tone is shrill, unwavering, and capable of cutting through wool, wood, and the Victorian resolve to remain polite at all costs. Your siblings, previously united in anticipation, now scatter like mice at the arrival of a broom. Victorian parents pride themselves on gifting educational toys. And what could be more educational than an introduction to music? It'll teach discipline, your father says, before quietly excusing himself to check the coal delivery, a task that keeps him outside for the rest of the day. Your mother tries to smile, but her eye is twitching. She suggests you practice in the garden. The garden is currently frozen, solid, and inhabited by a vengeful goose, but at least it's far away from her eardrums. You take your musical training seriously. You attempt God Rest Ye Merry, Gentlemen, which, in your hands, sounds more like a call to arms for neighboring crows. The tin whistle, you learn, can only be played in 2 volumes, piercingly loud, and is the house on fire. Your younger siblings try to wrestle it away, but you've never felt more powerful. Soon, the entire family is learning to cope. Aunt Edna pulls her scarf tighter, muttering about the last time someone gave a child a whistle in this house. The dog now lives under the kitchen table, trembling and deaf to reason. Even the goose seems wary, eyeing you with the respect owed to a fellow master of noise. Your efforts to play in harmony with your brother's toy drum end in chaos, as the competing rhythms produce a sound not unlike a cavalry charge in a tin mine. The older relatives offer advice: try covering the holes, play something soothing, or have you tried the silent game? But you know that real artistry is misunderstood in its time. By afternoon, you've discovered new uses for your whistle. It is excellent for summoning siblings, warning of imminent parlor raids, and, most importantly, testing the family's commitment to holiday cheer. The whistle also seems to possess supernatural powers. It repels birds, silences the clock, and, on one occasion, made Uncle George drop his sherry. Dinner is a quiet affair, punctuated by the occasional, accidental toot. The grown-ups exchange knowing glances, reminiscing about Christmases past when noisy gifts were considered rites of passage. Builds character, says Aunt Edna, who you suspect is already plotting to misplace the whistle before Twelfth Night. As the evening draws in, you stash your whistle under the pillow, already planning tomorrow's symphony, or perhaps a secret midnight concert. The room is at last peaceful. For a few blissful hours, the household returns to its usual rhythms of creaking floorboards and distant goose-related honking. In the end, the tin whistle becomes more than a toy. It's a test of love, patience, and noise tolerance. It's the Victorian Christmas gift that, in its own shrill way, brings everyone together, if only to plot its mysterious disappearance. A locket with braided human hair is both sentimental and a little bit alarming. Victorians cherished mementos that doubled as DNA storage. It's Christmas morning, and in a box small enough to hide secrets, you discover year's most personal gift, a delicate gold locket, its surface etched with flowers, its hinges stubborn from decades of use. You crack it open, expecting perhaps a miniature portrait or a pressed violet. Instead, you find a tightly woven lock of hair, chestnut, possibly auburn, and entirely unmistakably human. Victorian England is awash in sentimentality. And nothing says "I'll never forget you" quite like a bit of someone's scalp tucked into jewelry. Mourning customs are a thriving business. So, if you're not currently in mourning, don't worry. There's a full catalogue of relatives who probably are. The lock of hair is sometimes from a beloved child, sometimes a spouse, and occasionally, for the truly organized, a pet. No one ever explains how they acquired it, and it's best not to ask. Your family oohs and ahs as you turn the locket in your hands. It's tradition, after all. To refuse a hair keepsake is to reject the entire notion of family togetherness. "It's your grandmother's," whispers Aunt Edith, as if the locket might sprout legs and shuffle away. Or possibly Cousin Maud's. The label's fallen off. Either way, you're now the proud keeper of someone's DNA, the closest thing you'll get to a family tree until someone invents ancestry websites. Victorian hair jewelry is an art form, requiring hours of delicate handiwork. Some pieces are elaborately braided, twisted into patterns and shapes, flowers, initials, entire landscapes if you're particularly ambitious. The locket's hairwork is tight and intricate, so complex it would require a microscope and 3 lifetimes to fully appreciate. You imagine nimble fingers weaving strands under candlelight, pausing only to dab a tear or sneeze discreetly into a handkerchief. Of course, there's always a touch of unease. You pin the locket to your collar, acutely aware that it's both a badge of family loyalty and, arguably, a Victorian version of biological keepsake hoarding. There's a faint, musty scent, a reminder that history is closer than you think, sometimes right up against your jugular. You try to forget the story about Aunt Gertie, who kept a jar of spare locks in her sewing basket, just in case. Your siblings are both horrified and jealous. One covets the gold setting, the other wants to see if the hair can be removed and used for dolls. You clutch it defensively. Victorian rules are clear. Hair mementos are sacred, and tampering with them is said to bring years of bad luck. Or worse, an extra long bedtime story from the oldest relative present. Later, you admire older pieces worn by aunts and cousins. There are rings encircled by bands of hair, bracelets with woven strands, and pins that display intricate scenes, willow trees, weeping angels, even entire houses. You can't help but wonder, was this all out of love, or did people in the 1800s just have far too much time on their hands? Either way, you feel both connected and slightly on edge. By evening, you find yourself glancing at the locket, whispering a silent hello to its previous owner, whoever they may have been. In a world without photographs, text messages, or social media, hair keepsakes are a surprisingly practical way to keep loved ones close, very close. Sometimes, perhaps, a little too close. You tuck the locket away, grateful for family, tradition, and the strange comfort of knowing you'll always carry a little piece of history with you, quite literally. In the end, Victorian mourning jewelry is equal parts love, loss, and the kind of intimacy only this era could truly appreciate. Sleep well, knowing you're part of the family, down to the last strand. You're gifted a sewing kit with enough needles, scissors, and pointy things to perform minor surgery. If only you survive learning to thread a needle. Victorian England believes in the power of practical gifts, and nothing says character building quite like arming a child with a dozen tiny spears. The box is beautiful. Lacquered wood, a faded velvet lining, and that satisfying heft of something that could double as a weapon in a pinch. You open the lid to find an arsenal of sewing implements, neatly arranged by size and lethality. Needles so fine they disappear if you blink, needles so thick they could anchor a ship, scissors forged to withstand a small war, and pins, so many pins, each promising a new and unique opportunity for accidental bloodshed. Your mother beams, certain this will prepare you for the practicalities of life and perhaps even marriage. Every child should know how to mend and make do, she says, which is Victorian for, you will be sewing holes in socks until you're 90. Your siblings eye the kit with a mixture of envy and fear, having already suffered the infamous pincushion incident of '83, which ended with 3 minor puncture wounds and a lifelong respect for thimbles. You're expected to begin immediately. Your first task is to thread a needle. If you succeed on the first try, you are declared a genius. If it takes more than 5 minutes, you are consoled with the news that even the best seamstresses need patience. The truth, of course, is that Victorian thread is about as cooperative as a wet cat, and the eye of the needle is approximately the width of a human hair. You squint, poke, and eventually thread it with equal parts luck and desperation. The kit contains more than just the basics. There's a tiny awl for making holes in leather, a bone-handled seam ripper for undoing mistakes, and a small loom for weaving ribbons and belts, or, in a pinch, elaborate traps for your siblings. There are shears so heavy you need 2 hands to operate them, and a tape measure that curls up like a startled millipede when you let it go. There's even a miniature embroidery hoop, inviting you to add decorative flourishes to things that never asked for it, like your socks, your handkerchief, or your dignity. The possibilities are endless, and so are the dangers. Within minutes, you've pricked your finger 3 times, dropped a needle into the carpet, now everyone's problem, and nicked your sleeve with the scissors. The sewing box becomes a kind of rite of passage, a challenge to see who can finish their project without drawing blood. Your older sister, a seasoned veteran, demonstrates how to use the thimble. You follow her lead, only to discover the thimble has a way of getting stuck on your finger for the rest of the afternoon. Victorian sewing is about more than clothing. It's about making the best of what you have, and about never, ever throwing away a sock just because it has holes. Patching, darning, hemming, and even decorative embroidery are all part of the process. Your mother sets you to work on a handkerchief, instructing you to stitch your initials in the corner. The letters wobble and tangle, more abstract art than alphabet, but everyone is suitably impressed. By evening, you have created, through a mix of perseverance and sheer stubbornness, a slightly misshapen but functional handkerchief, a sense of accomplishment, and a collection of tiny bandages. You put the sewing kit away, proud and slightly traumatized. Tomorrow, you might even attempt a sock, or you might just use the scissors to cut more bread. In the end, the ultimate craft set is the quintessential Victorian gift. Practical, perilous, and full of lessons you'll carry into adulthood, often in the form of small scars and a stubborn refusal to buy new clothes. Victorian scents are strong. This year's perfume is floral, but in a way that might double as an insecticide. It comes in a tiny glass bottle with an ornate stopper and a label written in looping script. Something like Eau de Bouquet or Musk of the Orient. You open the box, catching a whiff before you've even removed the cork. It's heady, dense, and immediately takes over the room. You cough politely, blinking back tears. Your mother looks delighted. "Just a dab will do," she says. You wonder what dab means in this context. As you suspect, anything more would require a gas mask. Victorian perfume isn't just about smelling nice. It's about sending a message. A message strong enough to travel down the hallway, out the front door, and into the next county. In an era when personal hygiene was a delicate subject and bathwater was a luxury, a powerful scent could cover a multitude of sins, and possibly erase your memories of them too. You dab the perfume behind your ears, as instructed, and are immediately enveloped in a cloud of scent that can only be described as botanical ambition. It's a blend of rose, lavender, and something with a chemical edge, perhaps mothball, perhaps regret. The effect is instant. The family dog sneezes, your siblings start opening windows, and you feel yourself lifting slightly off the ground. There's a history to this aroma. The Victorians were masters of masking. With coal smoke in the air and a fear of miasmas, bad air believed to spread disease, perfume was seen as a defense mechanism as much as a fashion statement. The strongest fragrances were not for the faint of heart. Musk, civet, and ambergris, words that conjure mystery but really mean secretions from somewhere unmentionable. Add a handful of crushed violets and a dash of spirit of ammonia, and you have a recipe for both allure and alarm. Your aunt insists on sampling it too, dabbing a generous splash onto her handkerchief. Within seconds, her eyes water and the family parrot falls silent, possibly out of self-preservation. You all agree it's lively. Someone suggests that perhaps the bottle should be kept, for safety, inside 2 boxes and a locked cupboard. Outside, the world is cold and grey, but you are a walking greenhouse. On your holiday stroll, neighbours wave from a safe distance. Your perfume arrives 5 seconds before you do, announcing your presence like a royal decree. Passing horses shy away, and the lamplighter nods with respect. You feel strangely powerful, the very spirit of Victorian Christmas. Trailing floral chaos in your wake, the family gathers for Christmas dinner, and you do your best to keep your scented self at the far end of the table. Still, the aroma mingles with the roast goose, stuffing, and boiled potatoes, creating an olfactory landscape that future scientists will study for decades. You can't taste much, but you're fairly certain your skin will remain fragrant through at least Epiphany. The bottle finds a place on your dresser, right next to the hair locket and the child-sized taxidermy kit. You use it sparingly now, reserving it for special occasions, dog-chasing duties, and the occasional sibling rivalry. A single drop on a handkerchief makes an excellent substitute for smelling salts and, as it turns out, doubles as a mild deterrent for local mice. At bedtime, you breathe in the faint residue, caught between nostalgia and mild dizziness. The room feels festive, if slightly uninhabitable. You realize that, for Victorians, even a simple scent was an adventure, half luxury, half endurance test. You tuck yourself in, dreaming of wild roses, mysterious musk, and a future where perfume is best enjoyed at a respectful distance. You fall asleep knowing that, tonight, you're the most fragrant person in 3 postcodes, possibly the only one still conscious. You receive a grooming kit including a nail cleaner, a comb, and a mysterious Victorian device that looks like it was invented by Dr. Frankenstein. There it is, gleaming in its little wooden box, nestled on a bed of threadbare velvet. The kit is both impressive and intimidating, a miniature arsenal of self-improvement tools meant to drag you, body and soul, from child of Dickensian squalor to credit to the family name. Your mother's eyes shine with pride as she presents it, clearly imagining you as a future paragon of cleanliness, maybe even with a full set of teeth. The nail cleaner is a slender metal implement that, in less charitable times, could have doubled as a lockpick or an emergency toothpick. It's designed to extract everything life in Victorian England tends to lodge under your nails. Soot, goose down, mysterious crumbs, the lingering memory of last summer's hay. You poke and prod at your fingers, marveling at how quickly the day's adventures, coal handling, orange peeling, toy whittling, reveal themselves as a series of stubborn grey lines. The comb is solid bone, cold to the touch, with teeth so closely set you're certain it's intended to tackle something more formidable than hair. Perhaps it's for lice, or perhaps it's for splitting atoms. You drag it through your unruly locks, yanking and tugging until static crackles, and your head looks slightly less like a haystack abandoned in a windstorm. Satisfied, your mother nods. That's better, much more presentable. You wonder, privately, if you might have lost a little dignity and a lot of hair in the process. And then, the pièce de résistance, the mysterious tool, it's long, oddly shaped, and bristling with attachments. One end is hooked, the other is flat, and somewhere in the middle is a small rotating wheel that spins with alarming enthusiasm. You hold it up to the light. Your siblings gather around, eyes wide, offering suggestions. Is it a tongue scraper? A nose hair trimmer? A device for scaring away unwanted suitors? No one is quite sure. Your father peers over, clears his throat, and mutters something about personal hygiene rods being all the rage in London, though he's careful not to elaborate. Following the instructions, written in the sort of English that requires a secret decoder ring, you attempt to use each implement. The nail cleaner works, mostly, if you don't mind mild discomfort. The comb achieves what brushing cannot, at the cost of your scalp's goodwill. The mysterious device, well, you try it on your nails, your ears, and, in a prostrum moment of desperation, your teeth. Each attempt ends with a sense of mild alarm and a newfound respect for modern dentistry. In Victorian England, cleanliness is not just next to godliness, it's a social obligation, a symbol of your family's standing, and, if done properly, a deterrent to unwanted conversation about lice. The kit comes with a tiny instruction booklet, half of which is dedicated to the evils of slovenly habits. There's a section on proper brushing, a stern warning about soap wastage, and a deeply troubling paragraph on the dangers of untrimmed nose hairs. As the day wears on, you dutifully clean, comb, and attempt to tame every unruly bit of yourself. Your mother beams. Your siblings offer sarcastic applause. The family dog sniffs the kit and wisely retreats. You feel a strange mix of accomplishment and resentment, wondering if anyone in history has ever truly mastered the Victorian grooming routine, or if they all just gave up and grew beards. By bedtime, you've survived the onslaught of hygiene. You tuck the kit away, grateful for small victories, and relieved the Frankenstein tool remains an unsolved mystery. Clean, combed, and slightly traumatized, you drift off, comforted by the knowledge that, at least for tonight, you are Victorian perfection, at least on the outside. The final gift is the same goose from earlier. Now ready for the table, it's a test of both culinary skill and emotional detachment. One of you will be dinner, and it's not the goose. It's Christmas evening, and the time has come for the most anticipated and complicated tradition of all, the Christmas goose. This is not just any roast fowl. It is, in fact, the same hissing, honking adversary that has haunted your household for the better part of a week. You've survived its pecks, its territorial lunges, and its 3 a.m. existential squawking. Now, faced with its golden, crispy exterior, you're not sure whether to weep with joy or mourn the passing of Dot, a complicated friendship. The goose dominates the center of the table, surrounded by potatoes, cabbage, and a puddle of gravy so deep it could be charted by explorers. The skin is burnished and shiny, glistening in the candlelight, while the aroma drifts through the house, drawing every relative, near or far, to the dining room like moths to a flame. Even the family dog, banished to the scullery after last year's incident, whines at the door, hoping for a scrap and perhaps closure. There's a strange tension as the carving knife hovers above your former feathered companion. For days, the goose was a fixture of your daily life, a source of chaos, comedy, and the occasional bruised ankle. You remember feeding it stale bread, watching it chase your little brother, and negotiating uneasy truces during chilly afternoons. Now, it's the main event. The grown-ups are eager, plates at the ready, eyes gleaming with hunger. The children exchange nervous glances, wondering if this is what adulthood truly means. Eating your enemies. Carving the goose is a performance all its own. Your father, donning his bravest waistcoat, does the honors. He narrates every step for the benefit of the room. You must cut firmly, but with respect, he intones, channeling a priest about to conduct a particularly ambitious ceremony. The first slice is met with applause, part relief, part hunger, and part acknowledgement that no one else wanted the responsibility. You stare at the meat on your plate, torn between gratitude and guilt. To refuse would be ungrateful, but to dig in too eagerly feels a little heartless. After all, this bird has a history. Somewhere between the mashed parsnips and the third helping of stuffing, you make peace with the cycle of Victorian life. Geese come and go, but Christmas dinner is forever. As the meal progresses, the room fills with laughter, stories, and the slow, blissful haze of overindulgence. The goose, it turns out, is delicious. Succulent, tender, and just a little gamey. The flavor of victory, of survival, of making it through another year in the face of freezing winds, coal shortages, and poultry with a personal vendetta. You realize in this moment that befriending the Christmas goose was never about avoiding its fate, but about savoring every odd, wild, memorable detail of the season. The battle scars, the noisy mornings, the half-chewed slippers, they're all part of the tapestry of Victorian holiday life. Tomorrow, the leftovers will become soup, sandwiches, and family legend. When dinner ends, the bones are picked clean, the gravy bowl is empty, and the adults begin reminiscing about Christmases past. The children slip away, plotting next year's strategies for befriending, or at least outsmarting the next unsuspecting goose. You yawn full and content, aware that this bizarre, emotional roller coaster is exactly what makes Christmas unforgettable. As you shuffle off to bed, you pause to whisper a small, silly thanks to the goose, a worthy adversary and a memorable companion. In the end, you realize that in the Victorian Christmas tradition, dinner isn't just about food. It's about the struggle, the laughter, and the strange, stubborn ability to celebrate, even if it means eating your former roommate. You unwrap a wooden box labeled for young scholars, only to discover a miniature skeleton inside. It's supposed to teach you anatomy, but you're not sure if you're meant to assemble it, worship it, or apologize to it for interrupting its afterlife. The box smells faintly of camphor and secrets. You gingerly lift the lid, revealing a collection of tiny bones, carefully packed in straw, each one whiter and more delicate than the last. There's a diagram glued to the inside of the lid, a jumble of Latin names and numbers that looks less like educational material and more like the rough draft of a séance. Your parents beam with pride. A scientific mind must know the body. Your father declares, as though you'll be called upon to perform emergency surgery on Christmas morning. Victorian England is in the midst of a science craze. Everyone wants to be the next great discoverer, and every parlour is equipped with a microscope, a globe, or, apparently, a tiny corpse. The miniature skeleton is supposed to spark your curiosity, your sense of wonder, and, if you ask your older siblings, your nightmares. It's meant for constructive play, the instructions say. See how the femur connects to the tibia. Marvel at the human form. All very well, but you can't help but notice the ribcage looks like it's judging you for eating that second slice of pudding. You start to assemble it, carefully matching vertebrae, searching for the elusive clavicle. Your siblings gather round, their reactions ranging from cool to Is it haunted? The family dog steers clear, recognizing a curse when he sees one. Your mother, making tea in the next room, calls out gentle reminders: mind the carpet and don't lose the skull. Nothing says Christmas cheer like a scavenger hunt for missing phalanges. Each bone clicks into place with a satisfying little snap. But every now and then, a piece goes rogue, rolling under the table or wedging itself in the floorboards. You crawl about on your hands and knees, searching for a stray scapula and wondering if this is how future doctors are made. You suspect, deep down, that most future doctors simply have better lighting. The instructions come with additional fun facts about the human body, written in earnest, slightly ominous Victorian prose. The adult skeleton contains 206 bones. Each is vital. You try to imagine living without your fibula, then give up and focus on not snapping the delicate plastic ribs. There are notes about hygiene, posture, and the dangers of overexertion, a subtle hint that perhaps you should be lying down while you study the skeleton, ideally in a darkened room with a fainting couch nearby. Once assemble, your anatomical model is both impressive and disturbing. It stands on its little wooden base, grinning vacantly at the family. You wonder if you're supposed to give it a name, or perhaps knit it a scarf from Aunt Edna's leftovers. Your siblings dare each other to touch it, tap its skull, or arrange its arms in rude gestures. You half expect it to reach for the roast goose when no one's looking. At dinner, the adults marvel at your work. A fine gift, says your uncle, who once studied medicine for a week before fainting during a leech demonstration. That's how doctors are made, says your father, beaming, unaware that you're already planning to hide the model in his sock drawer for a post-holiday surprise. As the evening ends, you tuck your skeleton into its box. Slightly reassured and slightly spooked, you have learned a lot. About bones, about science, and about the fine line between fun, educational toy and future family heirloom that will be blamed for mysterious happenings for generations. In Victorian England, knowledge is power, but sometimes it's also just a little bit creepy. You drift off to sleep, comforted by the knowledge that the only thing staring at you from the shelf tonight is a tiny skeleton, assembled with love, curiosity, and just enough unease to keep things interesting. This year's festive candle set is made with whale fat, beeswax, and pigments that probably shouldn't be inhaled. Lighting them fills your home with cheer and a lingering scent of Victorian industry, with a subtle undertone of, is that lead? Victorian Christmas is a festival of fire hazards. You unwrap the candle set, admiring the delicate swirls of colour pressed into their waxy forms. Each is wrapped in brittle paper and tied with string, a presentation that screams both holiday cheer and flammable, handle with care. Your mother is thrilled. Your father gives you the look of a man already planning where to keep the fire bucket. The candles come in all shapes and sizes, tall and stately for the parlour, short and squat for the children's rooms, and one particularly odd twisted number that resembles a snail who's seen better days. The scent, when you peel back the paper, is a punch to the nostrils, a blend of marine tang, cloying sweetness, and something mineral that lingers at the back of your throat. That's the whale oil, your mother explains proudly, as though you've just sniffed a piece of family history. Whale oil is the latest thing in illumination. Once a luxury, it's now the must-have for middle-class families desperate to keep up with the Joneses, and also the Joneses' increasingly soot-blackened ceilings. Alongside the whale fat, there's a dash of beeswax for that old money feel, and the colours are achieved with Victorian-era pigments, some so vibrant they'd make a modern chemist faint. You read the label: Prussian blue, verdigris green, Paris red. The festive glow comes with just a hint of potential hospital visit. Your mother sets about arranging the candles on the mantelpiece. She insists on lighting them all at once for maximum effect. The result is breathtaking. A flickering glow that makes every shadow jump and dance. The painted wallpaper looks especially lively, although you notice your eyes start to water if you stand too close. You reassure yourself. Tears are just part of the Christmas spirit. Of course, candles are more than just decoration. They're the only reliable way to see after 4 p.m. when the winter gloom settles in for the night. Your siblings compete to see who can light theirs first, producing a chorus of sizzling wicks, and the faint crackle of optimism. Matches are struck. Flames are passed around like forbidden secrets. And everyone pretends not to notice how close Aunt Edna's scarf is to becoming the world's least festive torch. The house transforms in the candlelight. Every room glows with a gentle golden haze, except for the corners, which are now darker and more mysterious than ever. Your little brother experiments by melting drops of colored wax onto his stocking, creating abstract patterns and a minor crisis when he tips the candle over. The family's emergency towel is called into action for the 3rd time this week. You quickly learn that candles are not a set-and-forget technology. They demand constant supervision, a steady hand, and a keen sense of when the curtains are getting dangerously close to combusting. There's a constant background noise of wax dripping onto saucers, the hiss of burning wicks, and, occasionally, the stifled shriek of someone realizing their sleeve is just a bit too warm. Your father patrols the house, snuffing out rogue flames and muttering about the folly of progress. By evening, the air is thick with the aroma of burning whale, a hint of singed wool, and that mysterious metallic tang. The candles have burned down to squat, colorful stubs. Your cheeks are flushed, your eyes bright, and your hands waxy, from repeated drips and near misses. As you climb into bed, the last candle is blown out, plunging the house into peaceful darkness. You can still smell the day's festivities, sweet, smoky, and just a little dangerous. In the Victorian Christmas tradition, even light comes with a side of risk, and the memory of a house full of glowing, unpredictable, unforgettable warmth. You receive a sepia-toned photograph of Aunt Gertrude, looking about as cheerful as a tax auditor in a rainstorm. Victorian family portraits are rarely smiling, possibly because they're all holding their breath for the long exposure, or maybe because someone just reminded them it's goose for dinner. Again, you turn the photograph over in your hands, studying the heavy cardboard backing, the ornate golden filigree of the frame, and above all, the eyes. Aunt Gertrude's gaze is unwavering, her lips pressed into a line that would stop a speeding train. Her hair is arranged with military precision, her dress buttoned to the throat, and her expression so stern you feel compelled to apologize for anything you've done wrong this week, and perhaps for crimes you've yet to commit. Victorian family photography is less about capturing joy and more about immortalizing your most somber, disciplined self. Smiling in photos is considered indecorous. Smiles are for fools, the French, or people with suspiciously good dental work. Instead, everyone stares grimly at the camera, a process that often takes several minutes of stillness, broken only by the photographer barking, "Hold steady, don't blink, think about mortality." The resulting images have an air of haunted dignity, a quality that will ensure these photos linger in family homes for generations. You find a place for Aunt Gertrude's likeness on the mantelpiece, right next to a faded postcard of Brighton and a vase of eternally disappointed-looking dried flowers. Her eyes seem to follow you around the room, radiating judgment from every angle. Your siblings try to avoid her gaze, ducking behind armchairs and muttering about the curse of the family portrait. You wonder if they're exaggerating until you realize Aunt Gertrude looks exactly as she does in person, capable of detecting mischief at 30 paces. The family is eager to show off the new addition. What a likeness! your mother proclaims. You can almost hear her sighing. Indeed you can. Every time you sneak an extra biscuit or fail to finish your turnip, Aunt Gertrude's photo seems to glower. Your father explains that photos are expensive, rare gifts, moments frozen forever in sepia and solemnity. They are to be treasured, dusted, and displayed as a sign of familial respectability. Just be glad it isn't a daguerreotype, he adds. As if you're supposed to know what that means. The photograph becomes a silent enforcer of good behavior. You hesitate before running in the hall, knowing Aunt Gertrude's disapproval awaits you by the umbrella stand. When your little brother drops a marble, it rolls across the floor, stops at the foot of the mantel, and comes to rest under Gertrude's watchful stare. He leaves it there. Nobody dares retrieve it. Of course, the fun isn't all one-sided. Your older sister invents games. Who can stare down Gertrude? And what would Gertrude say? The rules are simple. One must address the portrait and confess a minor sin. Points are awarded for creativity and nerve, with bonus marks if Gertrude's expression seems to deepen into further disapproval. Occasionally, visiting relatives notice the photograph and reminisce. She was a woman of few words, they recall, and even fewer jokes. You nod sagely. Even though your only memory of Aunt Gertrude is her muttering about drafty windows and the importance of starch, still, the portrait gives you a sense of continuity. A reminder that, for better or worse, family endures, observes, and occasionally haunts. By bedtime, you tuck yourself in, glancing one last time at the sepia face in its golden frame. You wonder if you'll ever be that dignified, or if your own future photo will be similarly weaponized for discipline. For now, you're simply glad to have survived another Christmas, watched over by Aunt Gertrude, guardian of the Victorian hearth and queen of the unblinking stare. A brightly wrapped bag of Victorian sweets awaits you. Hard as cobblestones, with flavors ranging from overripe pear to, is this supposed to taste like soap? Breaking a tooth is basically part of the experience, and now you're halfway to a Dickens novel. The bag is tied with a festive bit of string and crinkles optimistically as you untie the knot, revealing a hoard of rock-hard candies, each wrapped in waxed paper, with Victorian calligraphy and faint spots of unknown origin. The colors are appealing: deep reds, golden yellows, and mossy greens, shining like jewels in the dim light of the parlor. Your mouth waters with anticipation, or perhaps it's just nervousness, knowing that last year's sweets doubled as marbles for weeks before anyone dared attempt to eat them. You pop the first candy into your mouth. It lands with a thud against your molars, producing a sound reminiscent of distant church bells and a brief flash of anxiety. The flavor hits, a blast of something vaguely citrus, followed by a second, more confusing note of perfume. It's sweet, yes, but also oddly medicinal, as if someone's combined lemon, cough syrup, and regret into a single sugar lump. You try to bite down, instantly regret your decision, and resort to rolling it around in your mouth, hoping it will dissolve sometime before next Christmas. Victorian sweets are famous for their durability. They're not the soft, chewy treats of modern convenience. They're survival rations, meant to last through long winters and even longer sermons. Some are so hard you suspect they could outlast your family's lease on the house. Others are so sticky they glue your jaws together, offering a temporary reprieve for your parents' ears but a permanent threat to your dental work. Your siblings gather around, eyeing your progress. Encouraged by your lack of immediate distress, your brother selects a deep purple candy, labeled Black Currant Surprise, and proceeds to chip away at it like a determined miner. Your sister picks a pale green sweet, quickly discovering the flavor is less apple orchard and more grandmother's hand soap. She bravely soldiers on, perhaps motivated by pride, perhaps by the knowledge that, in the Victorian era, waste is not an option. The flavors range from classics like peppermint and barley sugar to more experimental offerings, rosewater, sarsaparilla, and a mysterious winter spice that seems to contain every seasoning in the pantry, plus a dash of industrial cleaner. Occasionally, you'll hit a true gem, something resembling actual fruit, but the experience is always tinged with risk. Even the toffee is a challenge, designed to weld your fruit teeth together and force you into contemplative silence. Candy distribution is a delicate affair. The oldest children claim the best-looking sweets, while the youngest are left with the odd shapes and experimental flavors. Occasionally, a piece gets lost in the carpet, destined to become a fossilized relic for future generations. The bravest among you attempt to crack a particularly stubborn sweet by smacking it with the family Bible, a moment that combines culinary curiosity with a dash of blasphemy. There's a lesson in every bag: patience, perseverance, and the importance of dental hygiene. Your parents smile approvingly, watching their children experience the joys of delayed gratification and low-level dental trauma. In true Victorian style, you save your favorites for last, hoarding a couple of safe peppermints for the long winter nights ahead. By evening, the bag is lighter, your jaw aches, and you've learned a great deal about the resilience required to enjoy a treat in the Parian 19th century. You stow the remaining candies in your pocket, a comforting rattle as you head to bed. Tomorrow, you'll try the yellow one that smells like pickles. For now, you drift off to sleep with the taste of rosewater and perseverance on your tongue, content in the knowledge that in Victorian England, even sweets come with a story, and possibly a trip to the dentist. Victorians love mechanical toys, especially the kind that never quite work as intended. You wind up a tin monkey and watch it clatter across the floor, emitting a sound that's equal parts circus and existential dread. The dog hides. The doll stares. You try not to make eye contact. The monkey comes in a sturdy box painted with bright colors and the kind of illustrations that suggest it might be more fun to look at than to play with. You lift the lid to reveal the small, hunched figure of the monkey, all shiny tin, with a painted red vest and a wind-up key sticking out of its back like the start of a regrettable science experiment. Its face is frozen in a permanent grin that is either meant to be jolly or is the byproduct of several design meetings that ended after midnight. Mechanical toys are the pride of the Victorian nursery, where novelty trumps practicality and toy safety is just a rumor from France. The grown-ups are excited to see the new marvel in action, so you crouch down on the rug, give the key a few solid twists, and set the monkey loose. It jerks forward, arms flailing with a clacking motion, eyes wide, mouth forever agape. It crashes into the baseboard, bounces off, and begins a slow, meandering arc across the floor, leaving a faint trail of dread and chipped paint. The sound is unforgettable, a metallic scraping punctuated by intermittent squeaks, like a music box being strangled by a rusty accordion. The entire room falls silent, except for the mechanical mayhem. Your siblings watch from a safe distance, unsure whether to applaud or run for cover. The family dog makes the decision for everyone by bolting under the settee, ears pinned back, tail between his legs. You can hear the neighbor's cat yowling from 2 doors down. Even your Aunt Gertrude's portrait seems to glower with new intensity. Your parents urge you to try again, convinced that with proper winding, the monkey might perform as advertised. You comply, winding until you fear the key will snap or the toy will achieve sentience. The monkey rattles into action once more, spinning in a slow circle, then flopping onto its side with a disconcerting thunk. Its arms twitch for a while, and then it goes still, staring at the ceiling like it's reconsidering all of its life choices. The Victorians are nothing if not resourceful, so you experiment with new ways to play. Maybe the monkey needs a ramp? Perhaps it would enjoy a bit of music? You play a few notes on your tin whistle, and the monkey's head tilts in what you can only interpret as horror. You try racing it against your brother's wooden horse, only to find that the monkey loses every time, then proceeds to block the finish line out of spite. Despite its quirks and possible curse, the mechanical monkey is a source of endless fascination. Visitors to the house marvel at its modern ingenuity, and your father boasts to friends about the wonders of British engineering. Secretly, you're convinced the monkey is plotting something. At night, you place it carefully on your shelf, key removed, eyes averted, just in case it decides to explore on its own. In the end, you realize the monkey is the perfect Victorian toy, whimsical, mysterious, and slightly unnerving. It's an object lesson in the promise and peril of progress. Some nights, as you drift off to sleep, you think you hear a faint clatter from the shelf, a reminder that, in the Victorian era, magic, technology, and a touch of existential dread often come in the same shiny, unpredictable package. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let's take a slow breath and look back at the journey you've survived. You've unwrapped gifts that were sharp, flammable, toxic, sentimental to the point of emotional collapse, or simply ornithological in nature. You braved dolls with the 1,000-yard stare of a retired detective, candy that threatened your dental insurance before insurance existed, and toys that tested both your reflexes and your ability to remain alive. You handled oranges like they were treasure, dodged geese who were definitely plotting something, and politely accepted handmade scarves that could double as medieval restraints. And somehow, through all of that, you made it. Because the Victorians, bless their ambitious, soot-covered hearts, were trying. They really were. They loved Christmas with a wild, slightly chaotic passion. They reinvented the holiday, filled it with rituals and wonder, and gave gifts that were sometimes beautiful, sometimes alarming, and occasionally both at once. In a world lit by candlelight and powered by imagination rather than electricity, they found ways to celebrate, to laugh, and to add just a little magic to a season otherwise defined by cold winds and coal smoke. So, as you lie there now, warm, comfortable, and blissfully free of taxidermy-themed accessories, maybe offer a quiet thank you to the past, to the people who made holidays meaningful even when they had so little, to the families who gathered together even when the house was freezing, to the children who cherished a single orange like it was a miracle, and to the adults who gifted what they could, even if what they could was mildly dangerous. Because history reminds us that people are resilient, hopeful, endlessly creative, and occasionally ridiculous in the most endearing ways. And it reminds you that your modern world, your soft blankets, quiet nights, safe toys, non-poisonous art supplies, and Christmas cards without drunk insects, is a gift all on its own. So let your breath soften, let your thoughts slow down. Let the flicker of Victorian candlelight in your mind fade gently into darkness. You're safe, you're warm, and no small mechanical monkey is clattering toward you in the night. Good night.